welcome back to another episode of building the USS Defiant in Lego, and we're going to start this episode with a brick link order that has arrived. And I really want to shout out first of all to Mark from Newcastle Bricks, the Bricklink store which I ordered from. Now Mark very kindly had a 15% off sale going, and I was a little bit concerned that I was going to miss the end of the sale, but he very kindly got in touch and said he would happily send me a 15% off voucher if I did miss it. But luckily I did get that in before the end of the sale. So let's pull all these pieces out and I'll show you what I purchased. So here we have all the pieces that I ordered, and what I decided to do was get a load of Technic pieces to start prototyping the different ways I could do the structure. So I'm not going to go through all of these. I've basically picked up some Technic bricks of varying different lengths. I've got some really long ones down here, which I think are like 1x16, and then I've got some smaller 1x6s here as well. But a real mixture, because what I want to do is experiment with sort of deck heights and how I might go about creating that that structure. Now I also decided to order some what I call Technic beams, but I think they're actually called lift arms, and again they'll be used to build up the structure and see how we can sort of create a stable interior for this ship. And then finally, just at the back here, I picked up some of these Technic, they look like boxes to me, four-sided pieces, and those will also be really useful. I've got some ideas how to use those to connect decks together and modular sections together. So without further ado, I'm going to take all these bricks and start experimenting with the structure. Well, after a bit of playing around with some Technic bricks, we've got something that looks rather odd, I guess, from here. But this is what I've kind of come up with as a possible module of the structure. So what I've done is play with this idea of having these crosses, because you see it on a lot of architecture, particularly things like girder bridges. If I'm right, I could be completely wrong, so I'm no architect. But the idea is keeping this top really stable. There's a bit of wobble, but that's because we've got, I think, 2 points at the top and 2 points at the bottom. Obviously, if this was connected across multiple sections, each with these sort of cross braces, I think this would work really well. Now at the moment it's a little part intensive, and I would probably look to refine the parts that I'm using for this to both make them structurally sound, but also less part intensive, so that actually it costs less. Now I've built this, I'm in a position which I think I want to now experiment with putting the deck into. Now I believe what I'm looking at is 6 bricks for the height of the corridor, and then another 3 above for the sort of Jeffrey's tube internal access kind of corridors. Not corridors so much, but essentially a Jeffrey's tube. And that will allow some space. So what I'm thinking is this is roughly 6 bricks. It's a little bit, I think it's maybe a little bit taller than that. But I'm thinking then of putting like another structure like this, about 3 or so bricks above it. Now that actually makes this probably bigger than the 9 bricks I'm expecting for each deck. So I'll need to work that out. But currently, I'm thinking that this actually almost slides into here. There's a few plates that are making it stop, and obviously I've got this large Technic brick on the bottom, which I won't need because we've got them in here. So what I'm thinking of doing is taking this this corridor prototype, taking the plates essentially off the bottom. It's just made up of plates, and then transferring them over to here to see how that looks. And that does, I think, will give space as well for a ceiling. and then I can put a Jeffries tube above. So I'm going to go away and experiment with this, and then we'll come back and see how we're getting on. So here we are with the sort of next working prototype. I've had to make some alterations. So for example, I've changed the way that I've done these supports on the side. I've gone for this sort of triangular shape, which again is used in construction. Probably actually will work better, and that has allowed me then to use the space or fit this this deck piece in between the upright supports there. Now what it has done is it raised this bit up slightly, and that, if this is actually flat, allows for an extra brick there, which will give me some space to do something with the ceiling. But the Jeffries tube area kind of above then gives me that extra space to fit in wires for lighting and stuff like that. So I think that works quite well. Now, there are obviously going to be some issues. So, for example, this is a door into, probably like a mess deck area where you might have people sleeping into living quarters, I should say. And obviously this upright here is going to be in the way. So I'm going to have to think about how we deal with that. And obviously this is a straight piece of corridor, but this then bows off here and that runs across it. So I'm going to have to think quite hard about how I put these support pieces to support the kind of lower deck of the Jeffries tube, whilst also allowing for the design of the ship, which is corridors going all over the place. So yeah, it's going to be a challenge. I'm sort of liking this. What I think I'm going to do next is go away and build a sort of much smaller cross section, probably just an 8x8 piece. But I'm going to look to build the layers. So this bottom piece, 6 bricks, this top piece, the next 3, and then essentially repeating this above that. And I'll do that for 4 decks. So I'm going to go away, play around with that, try to come up with sort of basically a cross section of what it might look like with all the supports and the decks and the Jeffries tube sections. And then I'll come back and show you what I've got. And having gone away and done a bit of work with the bricks, the plates, a little bit of prototyping, here I've got kind of a mock-up of the cut through. And the reason for this is I wanted to start to understand quite the height or the thickness of the ship. Now this is 4 decks. You can basically see, starting from the bottom, the deck itself, so deck 4, the Jeffries tube section above the deck, then deck 3, Jeffries tube, deck 2, Jeffries tube, deck 1, Jeffries tube. Now, this is currently measuring at 40 centimeters. The overall height that I'm expecting the ship to be, or the thickness of it, is around 60 centimeters. So that gives me about 20 extra centimeters to play with. Based on the fact that these decks are roughly around 10 centimeters, that means I can get deck 5 in, which is sort of the bottom of the nacelles. And that will then give me some extra to work out how I'm going to do the kind of outer hull around the ship. And I suspect that I won't be doing it straight onto the top of the kind of the plate at the top here. So I will probably have some Technic, which will then allow me to do some angles and therefore put the outer hull on. Now, the other thing that I've noticed with this prototype is I think I've done the deck sizes slightly wrong, so there'll be a little bit of variation as well, because with these bricks here, they're not snot bricks, and to get the tiles on the walls, I have to come up a plate on top of the base plate. So there's a plate there, there's then 2 plates at the top before getting to the ceiling. So in total there's about 5 extra, so there's about 5 plates in total, and that then gives me a little bit of a wiggle room. If I add another plate in somewhere, then we'll get a total of an additional 2 bricks on top of the 6. The ceiling counts in that as well. So 1 more in there somewhere, and then it would be 6 plus 2 plus the 3. So in total we'd be looking at about 11 bricks rather than what we've got there, which is about 10. So that adds just a little bit extra height into the build, but I think well within the tolerance levels of what I'm expecting it to be, that sort of overall 60 centimeters. So that's, I think, been a really useful exercise. Now, following the last clip, I went off and I spoke to my dad. We talked through the construction of the corridor section that I had in the last clip with the Technic. And his view was that I could probably do away with a lot of the Technic because there wasn't actually that many contact points and therefore not providing a huge amount of structure. Whereas in what we see in front of us, and this was his suggestion, was where you've got plates for ceilings and floor plates touching and making contact with the bricks, you've got a lot more contact points, and therefore the clutch power is greater, added with the gravity, and that's how you get your structural integrity. Now, I understand what he's saying, and I think there's absolute truth in that, but I also think there's going to be a need for Technic as well within the structure, particularly when it comes to fixing the outer hull to what will be the central part of the ship, the 5 decks, or 4 and a bit. So that got me thinking. I kind of went away and thought about what that could look like. So we're going to jump over to looking at that, another little mock-up trial prototype that I've done, and then we're going to finish up with what I promised. I think possibly last update or this one, which is looking at how I do these kind of archways within the corridors. So I'll be right back with the next bit. So here we have the next prototype, and this was a very quick mock-up of what the benefit of Technic would be when it comes to the hull. Now, what I've created here is essentially 2 rectangles made out of Technic, one at the bottom, one at the top. The difference being that the one at the top has the studs facing upwards, whereas the one at the bottom has the studs facing downwards. And because of the ability to connect these pieces with these lift arms, it means that I can have plates pointing different, complete opposite directions. And if you think of this as the ship, if this middle section was where the decks are, then the top plate and the bottom plate are essentially the outer hull. So what I'm thinking is that is how I'm going to do my outer hull. I'm going to be using Technic, and that may well look like, certainly on the bottom, instead of this being the outer hull, perhaps this is the bottom of the bottom deck, so the deck plate, and then we're going to attach these bits and essentially have an air gap before then having the outer hull on the bottom. And of course, with these we can create all sorts of different angles. We can shorten the Technic pieces at the bottom and have them connected by lift arms sort of horizontally, and that can then give us different angles for the hull. And I think that's how we're going to get around some of the interesting shaping for the Defiant. So I'm really excited with that kind of light bulb eureka moment, and I think that will come in really useful. So let's now take a look at the work I've done on the archways. So first up, my first prototype. Ignore the wings, they're supposed to be 1x1s. I didn't have any 1x1s in this colour, but essentially what I've done is built this with a snot technique. So that's the way the studs are actually facing. I've got some interesting part usage, and essentially then just inverted it, putting some tiles at the bottom. The biggest problem with this design is that there is no way currently with this design to fixing it to the walls, so they would be freestanding, and as soon as you knock the mock, these would go tumbling over. So I didn't really like this. The other thing I didn't like about it was this kind of angle, or this corner piece here. What I wanted was, as it came up, I wanted it to curve more as a smooth curve. So I went away and picked out some more of my Lego collection to find some other pieces to see if I could improve on this, and I have. So let's check that out now. And here we have the second prototype. Now, I'm not 100% sure on the bit in the middle at the top, but we'll get to that in a minute. So what I've done here is I've essentially put a plate along the wall on the snot bricks, and then I've put a 4x1 tile just at the bottom there, and then this curved piece which is at a 90-degree angle from what it usually would be, and that's provided that smoother curve, which I really like. Now I've obviously replicated on that both sides, and then just need to join the gap at the top. At the moment, what I've done is put in a brick, sorry, knock the camera, a brick, a plate, and then two tiles, which I was hoping would connect. Unfortunately, I'm not sure why, whether it's just the way that the walls are. See, that's a little bit better. And once I've lined those up so that they're square to each other, or straightened up, then that should work. But yeah, that's kind of my idea. I think with Rolaren there's a bit of head clearance there. It gives the impression that it's quite a tight compartment, and of course if we put the ceiling on as well, we really would start to feel the cramped nature of the Defiant corridors. So I think from a perspective of looking at the corridor, the design for it is really coming along quite nicely. Now this leads me very nicely onto what next, because we've basically kind of got to the point where I need to get this video out, or I want to get this video out, but I've got plans moving forward. So I'm going to skip over to show you something I've purchased and talk to you about what I'm going to look at next. So following a comment on my last update, or the introduction video, there was somebody shared an article with me which talked about the size of the Defiant, and there's been quite a lot of debate within the Star Trek community as to what the actual size is. Now in the introduction I quoted 170 meters as the length of the ship. Now there is reference to that size out in the kind of the lore of Star Trek, but there's also reference to 120 meters being the length, and also if you go off Star Trek First Contact, there's evidence to suggest that it's actually 50 meters. Now obviously that makes a big difference to the size of the mock, and having read through the article and mulled it over, I've decided to go with the 120 meter length. Partly because actually that makes it just short of, I think, 3 meters, which makes this much more manageable. It's probably not greatly more manageable, but it does ease the burden of how many pieces I'm going to need, things like storage and where I can build it and transport and all those issues, more logistical issues. But I think it also will help with getting some deck plans in some ways. Now, one of the sources in the in the article that was shared was the Deep Space Nine technical manual, and that's what you see on screen now. Now, I went onto eBay and I managed to find a softback version for £15, and with postage, I think it came out to a grand whopping £18. Now, I thought it was a bit of a bargain, had to buy it straight away, and have. And it's got some nice detailed drawings in here. Unfortunately, what it doesn't have, if I can just find the Defiant page, here we go. So it's got some nice cutaways, some pictures that I've seen before, to be honest, and perhaps not the most helpful in terms of a deck plan, but some of these pictures are fantastic, such as the impulse engines, which would be useful, the warp propulsion system, a different view of main engineering, the computer core, some consoles, in just images that will really help when it comes to building the interior part of the ship. Sorry, I'm leaning over, that's really bad. It's just where I put the camera, of course. But yeah, so some really great pictures that will be really useful when I come to build the interior. Now I've got the the size, and I've got this, and I've found some deck plans online. What I've decided to do is go to my local printers who I've already spoken to, and get some essentially 1 to 42 plans of the decks printed off, which means I can then start to overlay plates and get the sort of the shape of the particular compartments and corridors and all of that. I can get that all laid out. I can start to use that as a template to build the ship. So that's what I'm going to go off and do. But that essentially will have to wait till the next update for me to show you those plans, and obviously then the build can begin, because what I want to do is start working on some compartments and getting the pieces in for that, so that I can really start putting the ship together. It's obviously going to be a huge job. I'm making it sound like I can get it done in a few months, but this will take a very, very long time. There's still lots to work out. I've started playing around with some Technic pieces to work out how I can connect modules together. So, maybe a couple of decks to, decks 1 and 2 to 3 and 4 with the sort of forward port side, because I'm expecting this almost to be the ship divided into quarters, and then each quarter divided into sort of the top 2 decks and the bottom 2 decks. It's going to be an interesting build, that's for sure. But that's going to do it for this update. Thanks ever so much to everybody who has watched the introduction video, who has subscribed to the channel. It's absolutely knocked me back how much support for this project is coming my way already. I really, really, really appreciate it. And if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, do please subscribe to the channel. It makes all the difference and will massively support the channel. Also, if you know anybody who'd be interested in building the Defiant in Lego, or in fact just a ginormous minifig scale Star Trek mock, then do please share these videos with them. And until next time, take care, and we'll see you soon.